We should remember that GST was first introduced in France in 1954. In 2015, Malaysia was the most recent countries. Malaysia is the most recent countries who has adopted value-based tax, GST. And in India, GST was introduced. Remember, it comes from short note also from 1st July 2017. But remember, before GST was introduced in India, already 160 countries all over the world had already introduced GST. So these are the basic points which comes for short note also we should remember. And today I'll just give you some brief description how GST was introduced in India and how many years it took. From which year GST introduction implementation, the process started from which year? The students, it started from the year 2000. Remember, GST started from the year 2000. I'll tell you that, but before that, you remember, in 2014, the then Finance Minister, Mr. Arun Jaitley, introduced the Constitution Amendment Bill in the Parliament. In 2014, when the present government, when the BJP government came under the leadership of Honorable Narendra Modi ji, then GST was actively started to be, the implementation started actively, the process of implementation from 2014. And the finance minister was Mr. Arun Jaitley. He is no longer now. And in 2015, May, the Constitution Amendment Bill was passed in Lok Sabha. That you remember, 122nd Amendment Bill was passed. The Integrated GST Bill 2017, Union Territory GST Bill 2017, Central GST Bill 2017, and GST Compensation to States Bill 2017 were passed in the Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha by 20th April 2017. So remember, these are the acts. These are the different types of acts in connection with GST Act: Integrated GST, Union Territory GST, Central GST, GST implementation, compensation to states. All these acts were passed in 20th April 2017. And remember, from 1st July 2017, GST was officially rolled out in India. And now let's go to the background story, how it came all over, how it came to India. See, it was in the year 2000 when Atal Bihari Vajpayee was the Prime Minister. He wanted that GST should be introduced in India, and he engaged some people like Asim Dasgupta, Finance Minister of West Bengal, and many other people. He gave the task of studying GST, whether GST can be introduced in India or not, and how it can be introduced. An empowered committee of the state finance ministers was chosen for the purpose, since they had prior experience working with the state VAT. So what he did, the ministers who were having experience of dealing with VAT, value-added tax, those ministers were taken and an empowered committee was made. Atal Bihari Vajpayee made an empowered committee. And the Fiscal Responsibility and Budget Management Committee was formed in 2004, and the committee recommended the introduction of GST. So in 2004 only, the committee recommended that GST may be introduced, but it was not done for several reasons. In the year 2006 and 7, in the budget speech, at that time, Finance Minister and the then Union Finance Minister announced that the GST should be introduced from 1st April 2010. It was decided, but it was not done, This is the part of the history. And however, various regions, GST was not introduced. It was pushed further. Then Constitution 115th Amendment Bill 2011 was introduced in the Parliament. The bill was introduced to incorporate certain provisions of GST and was examined in detail by a standing committee. With the dissolution of the Lok Sabha in 2014, the bill lapsed. So, in 2014, Lok Sabha was dissolved and new government came. At that time, the bill was lapsed, and that warranting the need of new constitutional amendment bill. So, since a new parliament was formed, new government was formed, so there was a need of a new constitutional amendment bill. So, starting from 2000, you remember, when you write about GST, the history of GST, you start from the year 2000. Just I'm giving you, it's very short in a very brief way that years. You always remember you have to start from the year 2000 when Atal Bihari Vajpayee was the Prime Minister. It was the starting point. In 2006, the then Finance Minister P. Chidambaram announced the GST should be introduced from 1st April 2010. It was announced, but it was not done. Then in 2009, Empowered Committee of State GST Finance Minister submitted first discussion paper in GST on GST in India. In 2009 came. In 2010, what happened at that time? President was Pranab Mukherjee ji, and he announced the delay in introducing GST, proposing to introduce it from 1st April 2011. So earlier it was proposed to be done in 1st April 2010. As you see here, it was proposed to be started from 1st April 2010, but ultimately it was pushed forward to 1st April 2011. See, is last year 26. It was in 2006, it was proposed to be started from 1st April 2010, but ultimately it was pushed to 1st April 2011. But in 11 also it was not introduced. So let's have a look here. In the Constitution, 115th Amendment Bill was focused on the introduction of GST in India was introduced in Lok Sabha. The Lok Sabha then refers the bill to Standing Committee on Finance for a detailed examination. In 2013, the Standing Committee on Finance submits the report to the Constitution Amendment Bill. In 2014, Lok Sabha resolution leads to the lapse of the bill. So this is the history. Remember, you have to write the history. I've written a very briefly here, but you can elaborate and you can read the books also. I've given a very elaborate so that you can listen, you can get the concept of how GST was introduced in India and the timeline and evolution of GST in India. I mean the history. The Constitution 122nd Amendment Bill was introduced in the Lok Sabha, focused on the introduction of GST. Here starts the activity starts from 2014. And bill is 122nd Amendment Bill, remember. In 2014, the bill was passed in the Lok Sabha and referred to select committee in Rajya Sabha. The select committee submits the report. Chief Economic Advisor led committee submits a report on the possible GST raise in 2014. In 2016, the bill was passed in both Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha and is then notified as the Constitution 101st Amendment Bill. Remember, when it was passed, now it becomes 100 first, 100 first means 101 Amendment Bill. This was passed. And you don't get confused about 122nd bill. See, several bills are introduced. So that way it was introduced, and on introduction, the name is 122nd. And all bills introduced are not passed. So if you find the list of the bills passed, it is 101st, 101. That we remember. Don't confuse 122nd Amendment Bill, and this was the bill introduced. And then when it is passed, in the list of the bills passed, it was 101, 101st, you can say. Yeah. The first state to, and at that time, Constitution wanted that at least 50% of the states' governments should give the ratification, should give the approval. And you remember that the state of Assam was the first state to ratify the bill. And then other states came. So it's the first ratification came from Assam. President Pranab Mukherjee gives his assent to the bill. Then he gave assent to the bill when 50% of states gave the approval. The Union Cabinet approves the setting of GST Council. At that time, no, Union Cabinet suggested that there should be a GST Council because there should be a committee who will do all the activities, setting the rates and how to collect the tax, all these things. So there should be a committee, how to make the policies. And in the GST Committee Council, you remember, Finance Minister of the Union Government is the chairperson and other ministers are there. I'll discuss about GST Council later on because GST Council is also very important for you for exams. Following which the first GST Council meeting was held in Delhi. So remember, first GST Council meeting was held in Delhi. And later on, lots of meetings have been held, even in Guwahati, in the hotel Radisson Blue. 23rd meeting was held. And in several other meetings, if you go by the meetings held by GST Council. And then came 2017, CGST means Central Government, Central Goods and Services Tax Bill, CGST Bill, IGST Integrated Goods and Services Tax Bill, UTGST, United Territory Goods and Services Tax Bill, and GST Compensation to States Bill introduced in the Lok Sabha. These bills are introduced in Lok Sabha. See, so many bills. CGST bill, IGST bill, UTGST bill, and GST compensation to states bill. Means when GST is collected by the central government, so how to compensate the states, how to distribute that to the states. That bill was also introduced in Lok Sabha. The bills passed in the Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha, and after which GST acts notified. And these bills when passed, then GST acts were notified, and GST Council notified GST rates on cess, goods and services. And then it was 19th, 18th and 19th May 2017, I remember. I'll tell you that when meeting was held, GST Council meeting was held in Srinagar, and in that meeting, the rates of goods and rates of services were notified by the GST Council. I'll take up with that later on. So you remember, on 1st of July 2017, officially GST was rolled out in India. So you remember how many years India took to introduce GST? You say 17 years, because the process started in the year 2000, sorry. The process started in the year 2000, and ultimately GST came in force from 1st July 2017. So you can easily say that